Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to VCs at UCD, the one and only speaker series here where we focus on venture capitalists and their startup investing. For those who have never been to VCs at UCD before, my name is Aaron Anderson. I'm the director of the Student Startup Center here at UC Davis. This event in particular is our chance to hear from real-life investors who are working with real-life startups and understand their story, how they got involved in the industry, the good, the bad, and the ugly of working with startups. And it's my pleasure today in particular to introduce a good friend and longtime mentor of mine, John Peters. John directs the Sacramento Angels group here in the area and is just a wealth of experience and knowledge investing in very early stage companies. So it comes at it from a very, we'll call it a unique and different perspective than, say, a late stage venture investor. So John, thank you for being with us. We appreciate your time. I'd love to start off just hearing a little bit about, we'll call it your early career. Can you tell us a bit about, where you studied, what you studied, where you spent those first few, those first years in your career, and how it led you into the world of startups? How did you get here?
Wow, we're going really far back there. This is like, it's easy for me to say a different century. So I got my, going way back, got my undergrad in accounting and information technology back in the early 80s. I'll give myself credit for that since that went into 1980. Very tech focused. I did get the accounting degree more just because I thought it was a good thing to have, and having that mix of business and technology was kind of a good skill set. Went into consulting from there. Worked for one of what used to be called the Big 8 firms, doing both small and large IT projects. I also got my CPA at that time, so that gave me a good foundation on business, finance, and that sort of thing. After about 4 years there, I went to Harvard for my MBA, and I focused on entrepreneurial studies and technology there, as much as you could in those years. I had the vision that I was going to do something entrepreneurial right after that, but I thought this was my slippery slope. What a great idea it would be to get experience at a really top quality company first, work there for 5 years, and then spin out into kind of the entrepreneurial world. I ended up at Hewlett-Packard, which was a fantastic company. Unfortunately, I didn't spin out there because I was having so much fun at what I was doing, and was pretty much in various leadership roles in product management, marketing, and R&D. So I got a really well-rounded functional background in leading those groups. Spent about 20 years there. The opportunities just were too good. I couldn't pass it up. I was having too much fun. I worked with teams all over the world. I got to manage businesses that were worth $200-300 million in revenue. I became ultimately, head of products, head of the business, that kind of role. Got involved in a ton of acquisition work. So probably did, 15 acquisitions at Hewlett-Packard, of big companies to small, tiny little tech tuck-ins. So I got a real good view of what it takes to evaluate companies, how you identify needs, how you assess the company, how you value them, that sort of thing, as well as how you execute it on the other side. And I love doing all that stuff. From there, I went to another software company called BMC Software down in the Bay Area, and pretty much did the same exact thing in the software business, enterprise software, enterprise tech, and BU leadership type roles. And again, still doing acquisitions, M&A, and that sort of thing. So really enjoyed all that. I have no regrets about that career. It was a fantastic career. I got to travel all over the world. I got to work in different countries. I got to manage businesses. Really, no regrets on that, even though I started out thinking, oh, this is just going to be for 3 or 4 years. Turned out not to be the case. But eventually I said, I'm going to basically leave that W-2 world when I'm in my mid 50s, which is what I did. I basically just said, I want to do something different now. I've got enough that I can be comfortable. Now I want to kind of move and do what I want to do. And at that point, I left that whole kind of, I call it the W-2 world, and had a vision that, now I'm going to expose something a little bit embarrassing, but well, it's not embarrassing, but I had a vision I was going to buy a company in the supply chain side of the wine business, the wine industry. I did a really thorough study on that in terms of I took the introduction to wine, I think the wine industry at UC Davis. I took a program at the San Francisco Wine School. I really dug into the nitty gritty of the wine industry, distribution, marketing, sales, production, all that stuff. I did a pretty thorough kind of industry analysis, looking at all levels of the industry to find out where the opportunities are at. And at the end of all that, I figured out where the opportunities were at, which were in managing tasting room visits, driving profitability from kind of sales and marketing, distribution, liquidation, those kinds of things were just nothing I was interested in. So what it ended up being was kind of exiting that whole path and developing wine as kind of just a really expensive hobby. While I was doing that, I was also doing some mentoring and advising, working with Aaron, Velocity Venture Capital in those days, and started to get engaged with startups, just giving feedback, right? Advisor sessions, feedback sessions. What would you look for in this company or that? What would you recommend? That kind of thing. Got really passionate about that, joined the Sac Angels, and then a year later, I became the chair of the Sac Angels group. That's my journey to investing.
So John, I love this story. You're gonna have to forgive me because I wanna dig into one comment you made here. It's maybe less relevant to the investing broadly, but I think highly relevant to some of the discussions our students are having with each other about what to do when you graduate. So got a lot of students looking at firms like Facebook and Google. Maybe being a product manager at some point, running these business units like you mentioned. So you had this big question in your mind of, do I leave early to launch a startup or work at a startup, and ultimately decided not to go that route. I'd be curious, what questions were you asking yourself? How did you answer the question about whether to stay or to go, whether to be an entrepreneur, be in the entrepreneurial world, or to stick with the tech job that was fun and challenging? How did you wrestle with that?
It wasn't like a big dilemma, to be honest. Once I got into that path of managing businesses, I saw that I could do a lot of what I wanted to achieve and what really motivated me from inside those company opportunities. I got to manage a P&L. I got to work on sales strategy. I got to work on the product. I got to work on the marketing approach. All those things were I was just having too much fun. So it really wasn't, I didn't reach this point where I'm like, okay, that's my 3-year or 4-year limit. Am I going to exit? I was just too tied up in what I was doing and too passionate about the work I was doing and I was motivated by it. So it wasn't like this, kind of big come to moment where I'm kind of like, am I in or am I out? I just fell in that path and just kept going with it because I was just, I got promotions, I got opportunities. There was more than enough out there. I always did have the mindset though that I'm staying because I want to stay, not because I feel trapped. And I think that's an important mindset to have, particularly now in the current employment world. I think you got to look at jobs as somewhat like outcome driven projects, that you're going to be with this job because you came in to achieve this or learn this or do this. And once that's done, then I think you fairly should say, is there another growth opportunity there, or should I think about doing something else? These days, tech companies are constantly restructuring, reorganizing. If you don't get a good seat at the table on one of those things and something you're motivated and interested about, you got to have this mindset that I'm good with taking my own choice and exercising my right to just look for another opportunity and go see if you can find that other opportunity. But stay in passion, engaged in the work that you're doing. I think that's the one piece of advice I would pass along, and view it as you're there to achieve something. You're not there to, get golden handcuffs or, retire from that company.
Totally. Now it makes a lot of sense. Well, let's dive into this world of investing. And I forgot to mention it earlier, but if any of the students in the room, if you have a question you want to ask John as we go along, please, by all means, just raise your digital hand. We'll be sure to call on you as the conversation flows. So don't be bashful about it. But so, John, you mentioned, you dove in with the Sac Angels. You were the chair there. Can you explain to us a little bit about the role of an angel investor and maybe how that's the same and different from an angel group like the Sac Angels? Um, what value does an angel group offer to early stage companies?
Well, I think it varies by group, of course. But where angels can provide a lot of value, like our group, we have about 60 members. That kind of, changes, yearly, but basically around that many members. 20 to 25 of our members are former CEOs/founders from all different industries. So what they bring are really tremendous operational insights. Other folks in our group are people like me. They bring, kind of C-level, senior executive type experiences working in enterprise tech companies, wherever, right? They're coming from industry and they bring practical experience. And then yet other people are lawyers and finance people, so they bring other skill sets. So when you're with an angel group, and of course, bring your company there, you're looking for relevant skills in the group, people who are going to be invested in you and add value to your journey. For the most part, it's not always the case, but for the most part, that's kind of what you want. So angel groups provide that kind of mentoring kind of role, and then they provide connections from everything for business development to R&D talent to venture relationships to advice on how to capitalize your business, because that's something I think all startups need to think about in kind of a long-term kind of mode. And I'm constantly, I just serendipitously run across customer opportunities, and I'll pass it along to one of my startups and say, hey, you got to connect with this guy, and I'll have that relationship and I'll bring them together. And, so there's that value as well. So angels play a super important role in helping startups get off the ground and start to build a, really cohesive plan, get advice, get coaching, make connections in the industry for all kinds of reasons: talent, customers, partners, investors, etc.
It's not just the money.
It's definitely not just the money. Although I will say, in some cases, it is just the money. But I would say the real value an angel group can bring is under, you're not taking advantage of it if you're not tapping into the background expertise of those angels.
Right. Well, so John, you were telling me before the phone call started that the SAC Angels made 17 investments last year. That strikes me as this an enormous number, which means you saw even more companies come your way that you didn't invest in. I'm curious, what are some of the common traits that the top-notch entrepreneurs share? Or when you see a deal for the first time, what are some things you see going on that get you really excited about a company when you first start taking a look at it?
Well, I think some of the most important things that we look at, so first of all, we invest in seed companies, but we also more recently have been investing in venture round companies as well. So we kind of invest across the spectrum. But I would say when you're at that early seed stage, you don't have the financials history to have kind of credible financials that anybody can count on. You need financials because they expose your business model and your assumptions and how you think this business is going to come together and grow and get capital later on. But the financials aspect is less important. It's important, don't get me wrong. When I say less important, I don't mean it's not important. But more important is, is the space that you're in a big and fast growing market? and ideally one that's at an inflection point, meaning that there's some underlying drivers that are happening around that particular industry that are causing this movement in that direction. And so that big and growing market is obviously a big factor. I'd say secondly, you got to have a unique value prop. So ideally you're in a complete, kind of white space area. The best investments are where you've got a first mover has a really unique vision on how to tap a big and growing market. And they're the only ones there, or maybe they're there with a handful of other fledgling companies, but they're tapping into something with a really unique approach. It could be a business model, it could be technology, it could be a message, it's something. And that unique value prop is super important. And ideally, investors like that it's somehow tech focused, but it doesn't always have to be the case. You can have an execution and viral focus as well. And then third is great founders. People are looking for, fantastic founders. And what's a great founder? There's no easy way to explain that. People kind of know when they see one, but in general, they're founders who have a maturity and an experience and a backstory that fits what they're trying to do. And I will tell you that there's a bias in the seed investing world to look for experienced founders. I wouldn't say it's to the exclusion of new founders, but experienced founders, just by the big numbers, have a 3-to-1 advantage over first-time founders. Again, that's not to discourage or anything like that. It's just a practical reality of how angel investors will look at deals. So they want somebody that they feel like, hey, this guy is either, or woman is either, they've been part of a startup in an executive or a founder role. They've exited startups before. They kind of have walked the whole life cycle of capitalizing a startup all the way to execution. They might have worked in a larger company, but they've done exactly what their startup is focused in, or they bring directly relevant skills. They have kind of an insider view and experience that is compelling. Those are going to be the ones that are the most attractive. So it's those three factors. It's very simple, but it's what's the market like and the story around that. What's the value prop for the customer? Clear statements on how what they're doing is driving real customer value. And three is who are the founders? What's their story? What's their experience? How do they give me confidence that this startup is going to, get legs?
Awesome. Well, John, let me flip that question on its head then. What are some common mistakes you see folks make when they come pitch to you? Reasons you might disqualify a potential deal?
I think, this is actually easier than it should be. But I think, so one example is they haven't really thought through their plan. There's a lot of I don't know, positive feedback some people will get by, well, yeah, I'm just making it work. I'm hacking this. I'm growth hacking. We're going to make this happen. We'll figure it out and pivot and iterate along the way. But you can't really build a startup with that as your operating mode. You got to have a vision for how this unfolds. Angel investors are investing in your company to get an exit. So they want the story. What are your expectations on how this gets from where you're at today to something that could be exited? And what type of exit are you looking, for, and in what time frame? So that lack of awareness on how they're going to capitalize it, how they're going to expand it, at what stages are they going to grow, at what stages are they going to need to bring in new talent, all those things, that kind of milestone phase driven kind of mentality is something I see people will fail on. They might like exactly what you're doing today, but the investors will get, nervous because you don't really know where you're going next. And by implication, we're investing in something that could go any direction. How do we know? So you like that kind of thread that goes through kind of how you're going to build and eventually exit this business. I'd say another area is they get too involved with the tech in the features. So it becomes about the feature driven, kind of the fascination with their concept instead of what's happening in the marketplace. And it rarely happens that somebody just nails that and sticks it like, oh, I'm going to do this and that's going to be my business for 10 years. And I'd say 99% of the time, the best startups evolve their value prop along the way based on what kind of customer feedback they're getting, the marketplace, how things are evolving, how new opportunities they see to extend the value that they're delivering and the financial opportunity. So that ability to kind of, pivot and adjust along the way and do that quickly, the old fail fast mentality is, I think, super important. I think another thing that I see, and this is a negative, and unfortunately it happens kind of post, is they're really poor with communication with investors. My best companies provide unbelievable monthly updates on where the company is at, and they are blunt and to the point with what they're sharing. It's not candy coated, the sky is blue and the birds are singing kind of stuff. It's, we messed up on this, we're struggling in this area, we're seeing good momentum here, we're adjusting our financials in this area. They're really clear about what they're doing, and they demonstrate an intimate knowledge of the critical business model paradigm that they're building their startup with. So, I mean, they're in the nuts and bolts on what are the key metrics that are driving their business. And they not only look at those metrics, but they talk about them. They're like, this metric is 10% lower than we targeted it to be. And that means we need to perhaps change our talent in this area or that area. So that kind of in touchness with the business, super important. And when people are not that way, it's a big negative. So that communication with investors, I see that one happen all the time where they're not communicating as clearly, and the ones that do, you're just thinking, wow, this company is going somewhere. I don't know. Those are just a few things that I've seen. Not being realistic, not pivoting faster. I guess one other thing that I see as a common mistake is they don't understand the window of opportunity that startups come with. It's a race. It's a race to revenue and building your company. And if you don't appreciate that, let's say you just got your funding round and you're like, oh yeah, we'll have time to do this. If you're not marching towards a set of outcomes and milestones in a kind of with urgency, then you're missing the boat. And I do see that happen, unfortunately. And then that's where people get, caught dry in the valley of death, where they start to run out of money. They realize that they're not meeting their metrics, and then they think, well, I'll just go back for more, which is never a good proposition, because that's fertile ground for down rounds and all kinds of negativity. So that kind of appreciation for the urgency of action is another area that I see people failing in, where they don't appreciate that urgency.
Right. Okay. John, we'd love to hear a couple of war stories. Can you tell me, let's start with the happy ones first. What are some of the investments you've made that have done really well, that you're really excited about? Maybe tell us a bit about those companies. And then maybe just as a, informative, we'll just say some of the ones that didn't work out so well.
Yeah, this is hard because they're companies that I don't want to really reveal names on or anything like that. But I would say so. Maybe one that worked out, and this one I'm very happy to reveal the name, is Trifecta Nutrition. This is a case where, and I will just say, let me just paint this backdrop first. When I first started investing, I thought the best place for me to invest is what I know, enterprise tech. And I'm going to invest in companies around enterprise tech. And that's going to be my approach. And I quickly found out that wasn't enough. And those have been some of my worst investments, to be honest. And some of my best investments have been where I followed the 3 rules that I mentioned earlier around market, founder, and value prop. And I would put Trifecta Nutrition in that context. It's a fantastic founder, Greg Conley at Trifecta Nutrition. It's a unique market twist. Okay, yeah, you could say meal kit industry has already been taken over, but the reality is his specific focus had not been. It's a unique unmet need that he was going after. The younger demographic, the athlete-focused consumer with a very organic, value proposition around food and diet-driven value proposition around menu construction. All those things were exactly in the right place, and that's a great example of, hey, it's an area I don't know yet. I could see that this guy really knew what he was talking about. He was a great founder. You could just tell he knew what he was doing. He thought through every execution dimension of what he's working on, and it was a unique market opportunity. All those three things kind of came into place, and sure enough, they're doing fantastic. That's a really great success story. Other ones where, gee, I don't know how to diagnose some of these, but I did invest in a company that, industry guy, senior executive out of exactly the tech space that he was going into, first time founder. Okay, even though this guy was probably in his mid 40s. And actually customer references, a reasonable tech story behind it. But in the end, he'd never really lived through that startup process before. So in my mind, he kind of fell into the trap of the lack of urgency to hit milestones and make progress, and the lack of self-awareness that he was in trouble. In spite of telling him that, because you couldn't tell this guy that. He wasn't going to listen. He was too tied up in and committed to his thing that he was working on, his story, if you will, about his solution, where he couldn't see the forest for the trees. And that led to delays, and that led to this problem where you're not hitting your revenue target. Eventually, you got to start generating revenue, right? That's ultimately the measure, revenue, profitability, and growth. And sure enough, now he's thinking down rounds and sputtering along and investing his 401k in the company and not taking a salary and on and on and on, scraping by. I mean, they're not dead by any stretch right now, but they're certainly not thriving. And I'm not sure that they're ever going to really bust out of that. So there's two examples where in one case, unique market, great founder, knew what he was doing execution wise, really could talk any dimension on the execution that you could think about, and a unique value proposition with what he was doing, and a concept on how he was going to deliver that. And there's something there to that I would say is universal around great founders. You could just tell by talking to them when you dig into the business. You think you're coming in with a 3-minute pitch, and that's what you got to do is build a great slide set and pitch your business. But if you're an angel investor, the pitch is just the intro. You're not going to invest on a pitch. You're going to invest on a dialogue with that founder. And the dialogue is not something that they can predict. You're going to have a discussion with them and ask them hard questions and see how they respond. And do they know the why their competitors are succeeding or failing? Do they know the dimensions of what it's going to take and what talent they're going to need on their team? Do they know, what their gross margin situation is and how they're going to drive and improve their gross margin and what time frame? Do they know? I mean, and on and on and on, all the nitty gritty details of what it really takes to build a credible startup that can scale. Because in the end, you've got to scale. You can't take 10 years to get to $10 million. You got to be thinking you're taking 5 years to get to 50 million or 100 million or more.
Awesome. Well, so John, your group here, it's the Sacramento Angels. There's a big implication here that you're focused on the area and the region. Can you help us understand that investment thesis a little bit, and what it is about Sacramento that gets you excited? It's not the heart of the Silicon Valley, although we're not far either. What do you see as the future opportunity for investment here?
Well, I would say, so let me just clarify something there, is that, look, we want our angels to have great returns. In the end, if they're not having a great return, they're going to leave. They're not going to be part of our group. Because who wants to be a nonprofit giving away money? And that's ultimately, if you don't pay attention to the returns and the exits, that's what you're going to get. And so we really focus on deal quality with our pipeline. We're looking for the best quality deals. The old adage used to be for angels was, don't invest beyond a day's drive. And I think you still see people advocating that. But the new adage is, invest where you can make the impact. Of course, you still love to have local companies, but the reality is, if it's a choice between finding great opportunities that you can invest in and get involved in versus having them be within a day's drive, you're going to pick the great opportunities. And so if you look at the SAC Angels portfolio right now, I'd say we're probably 30 to 40% local. But we're also probably 40% in the greater region, so Northern California, Bay Area. And then I would say we're probably 10% and a little bit growing outside even Northern California. We did 2 investments in New York City this year, one in DC. That's kind of outside the traditional path. So that's kind of our approach, and I feel like it's really working out well. We had a tremendous year from a up round perspective. We probably had 9 companies that had up rounds in our portfolio this year, which is really fantastic, meaning they got like their Series A or B or C, whatever, and got 2x, 3x our original investment. So that's, I think, you got to appreciate, that's a big difference. We are not a university incubator. We're not a startup SAC. We're not a service organization from that perspective. Number one is really, we got to make a positive return. And then from there, there's a big passion to invest local. People, if they're given a chance of local or not local, absolutely. If it's a quality opportunity, they're going to invest local. But it has to be a quality opportunity or they're not going to invest, because nobody wants to just give away money. And trust me, there's a lot of money that gets given away. At least a third of the companies just go belly up. You lose everything. That's not a fake statistic. 50% of the companies return 1x or less. So think about that. You could lose everything, or you're going to get maybe dollar for dollar back, or something less than a dollar for dollar back. That's half the investments. Nobody can sustain anything that doesn't have some critical view of those investments. So one thing I see happening in kind of the seed investing industry, particularly angel groups, is people are partnering more. They're opening up, more pipes for, opportunity identification. You got to get out there. It's a contact sport, and that's important. In terms of SAC, here's the great thing: we live right next to the Bay Area. And so I don't think talent in our area is a problem at all. I think you can find almost any talent you want to find in the Sacramento area. And I think that's a huge swing for Sacramento. I think 10, 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. But I think now it absolutely is. You also see people moving out here from the Bay Area. I tend to have 1 foot in the Bay, in Berkeley and in San Francisco, and 1 foot local. And so I talk to a lot of people down those areas, and I hear the chatter. people find, the capital region, Sacramento area, kind of an attractive value proposition. They can raise a family here. They can, build a career here. They can afford a house. There's a lot of quality of life benefits. And a lot of those people are thinking, I don't have to give up any of the value opportunity I have to work out of the Bay Area. So that kind of like flexibility to think, yeah, my career, I could live in the Sacramento area and still have good career opportunity, even if I have to go back down to the Bay Area as a remote worker that I had, in the old days when you had to be kind of local. So I feel like that's a plus that's bringing in talent into the area. And I think what creates a really healthy startup environment is experienced folks, talented folks to build out the talent bench. And I think that's going to fuel some good growth for Sacramento. So I'm pretty bullish on Sacramento. We're seeing some quality startups in Sacramento, more so than I think we've seen in the past. It's not like 3 times more, but it's definitely, we're seeing some really credible, quality opportunities out there.
Awesome. I love to hear it, John. Well, that is the end of my question. Let's give John Peters a round of applause again from the Sac Angels. John, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you being here.
Pleasure.
And we'll be sure to ping you with any questions that come in the future. But
yeah, happy to be available for anything.
Okay, thanks again, John. Take care.
All right, got it. See ya.